The Thompson family dining room was a cathedral of wealth, gleaming mahogany, crystal chandeliers, and silence so thick it could suffocate. Elena Rodriguez sat at the edge of this carefully curated world, her emerald green dress a deliberate choice of confidence against the room's muted palette. At 28, she was a success by any measure. A senior marketing strategist at Nexus Communications, she had clawed her way up from a working-class immigrant neighborhood in East Los Angeles. Her parents, her father a construction worker, her mother a home health aide, had sacrificed everything to give her opportunities they never had. Michael Thompson, seated beside her, represented a different world entirely. Heir to a real estate empire, he moved through life with the casual privilege of someone who had never known genuine struggle. His perfectly tailored navy suit whispered of generational wealth, of boardrooms and country clubs. His father, Robert Thompson, was watching her. Not looking, watching. There was a predatory intensity in his gaze that made Elena's skin prickle. She recognized that look. It was the same way developers viewed neighborhoods they wanted to revitalize, code for displacement, for erasure. So, Robert began, his voice cutting through the ambient silence. Elena, tell me about your work. It wasn't a question. It was an interrogation. Elena met his gaze directly. I'm a senior marketing strategist at Nexus Communications. We specialize in brand transformation for emerging companies. Robert's lips curled slightly, a micro-expression of disdain. Interesting career path. The subtext was clear. How did someone like you end up here? Michael shifted uncomfortably. His mother, Karen, studied her wine with sudden intense fascination. His sister Jessica watched the exchange with a mix of curiosity and something else, something that felt like anticipation. I worked hard, Elena responded. Each word was a shield, carefully constructed. Earned scholarships, completed multiple internships, built my professional network strategically. Robert leaned back in his chair. The movement was calculated, a display of power, of the ability to dismiss or elevate with mere body language. Hard work, he repeated, the words dripping with a condescension that was almost performative. Is that what they're calling it these days? Elena felt the temperature in the room drop. This was no longer a conversation. This was a calculated attack. Excuse me? She said, her voice level. Robert's gaze swept over her. Not just looking, but evaluating. Measuring her worth by some invisible, arbitrary metric of social capital. Someone from your background, he said, must have found some creative ways to advance. The racism was subtle, the classism, razor sharp. Michael remained silent, not supportive, not defensive, just silent. In that moment, Elena understood something profound. This wasn't just about her. This was about power, about who gets to decide, human worth. About the invisible barriers constructed by people like Robert Thompson, barriers built not with bricks, but with words, with looks, with calculated silences. The silverware continued to clink against fine china. The world continued to turn. But something fundamental had shifted. Robert Thompson had just made a grave mistake. He had underestimated Elena Rodriguez. The drive home was a battlefield of silence. Michael's hands gripped the steering wheel, knuckles white, avoiding eye contact. Elena stared out the window, her mind replaying every poisonous word Robert had spoken. Are you going to say anything? She finally broke the silence. Michael sighed. My father can be difficult. Difficult? Elena's laugh was sharp as broken glass. He called me street garbage in front of his entire family, and you did nothing. The word nothing hung between them, a damning indictment. She knew this wasn't an isolated incident. Throughout their 2-year relationship, there had been subtle signs, microaggressions carefully masked as casual observations. comments about her neighborhood, subtle hints about her family's background. Michael had always deflected, always avoided confrontation. "I was trying to keep the peace," Michael mumbled. "Keeping the peace," Elena repeated, "is what allows racism to breathe, to grow, to infect entire systems." When they reached her apartment, Elena didn't invite him inside. Something had fundamentally changed. This wasn't just about one humiliating dinner. This was about a pattern of systemic dismissal she had tolerated, hoping love could bridge fundamental differences. She spent the night researching, not just Robert Thompson, but his entire network: real estate development, community investments, political connections. A complex web of influence that systematically marginalized communities like the one she came from. Her marketing background wasn't just a profession, it was a toolkit. She understood narrative construction, brand management, strategic communication. And right now, her personal brand was under attack. Text messages from Michael started arriving. Apologetic, pleading, defensive. "My father didn't mean..." "You're overreacting. Can we just forget this happened?" Each message confirmed what she already knew. Michael wasn't an ally. He was a participant in a system designed to maintain privilege. By morning, Elena had made her decision. This wasn't about revenge. This was about accountability. About exposing the mechanisms of institutional discrimination that people like the Thompsons perpetuated. She pulled out her professional network contacts: investigative journalists, urban planning experts, community activists, people who understood that true change requires more than emotional outbursts. The dinner was supposed to break her. Instead, it would become her catalyst. Robert Thompson thought he had silenced her. He was about to learn the true meaning of visibility. Strategic planning required precision. Elena transformed her living room into a war room of information, covering her coffee table and walls with meticulously organized research. Thompson Real Estate Development wasn't just a company. It was an intricate ecosystem of power built on decades of calculated manipulation. Elena's marketing expertise became her most potent weapon. She understood how narratives were constructed, how reputations were built and destroyed. Her first step was comprehensive intelligence gathering. Public records revealed only the surface. She needed deeper insights. LinkedIn became her initial hunting ground, connecting with former employees, studying professional networks, mapping the human infrastructure of Robert's empire. Each connection was a potential source of information, each profile a potential crack in the foundation. Her professional network proved invaluable. Maria Rodriguez, no relation, but a seasoned investigative journalist, became her first critical ally. Over late-night coffee, they dissected Thompson Real Estate's historical patterns. "Look here," Maria pointed to a series of zoning applications. "See how they consistently avoid minority neighborhoods? It's not just coincidence, it's systematic exclusion." Property records told a brutal story: redevelopment projects that systematically displaced low-income communities, tax incentive manipulations, shell companies designed to obscure true ownership. Robert Thompson hadn't just built real estate, he'd constructed systems of economic segregation. Elena's approach wasn't emotional, it was surgical. She compiled a dossier with military precision, documented zoning discrimination, mapped out shell company networks, tracked political donations, identified key vulnerable connections. Michael attempted to re-establish contact. Texts, calls, emails. Each went unanswered. He represented a system she was systematically dismantling. Her network expanded. Urban planners, community activists, data analysts. Each brought a unique perspective to her growing investigation. Professor James Hartman from the Urban Policy Department provided crucial academic context. "What you're documenting," he explained during an encrypted video call, "is a textbook example of institutional racism in urban development." Elena's plan crystallized. This wasn't about personal revenge, this was about systemic exposure. She needed proof that would withstand legal scrutiny. Every document was verified, every claim cross-referenced. Her marketing skills of storytelling now became tools of institutional accountability. The Thompson family believed they were untouchable. They were about to learn the power of strategic visibility. Her laptop became a weapon. Her research, ammunition. Each carefully documented page was a potential demolition charge against a system built on silent oppression. Robert Thompson thought he had dismissed her as street garbage. She was preparing to show him exactly what street smart truly meant. The first phase of her plan was complete. Strategic groundwork laid, evidence gathered, connections mapped. Phase 2 was about to begin. Execution required patience, precision, a surgeon's touch. Elena's first move targeted Thompson Real Estate's most vulnerable point, its financial reputation. She strategically leaked anonymized internal documents to key investigative journalists, each packet a carefully crafted narrative of systemic misconduct. The initial tremors were subtle. A local business journal published an exposé on questionable land acquisition practices. Then a regional news network picked up the story. Each piece of information was a calculated breadcrumb, designed to create maximum impact with minimum direct attribution. Her marketing background proved invaluable. She understood narrative construction, how to make information spread like wildfire without leaving a direct trace. Social media became her amplification tool. Community activists, urban planning experts, and local advocacy groups began sharing the emerging narrative. Thompson Real Estate's first public response was predictably aggressive. Legal threats, attempts to suppress the emerging story. But Elena had anticipated this. Each document was meticulously verified, each claim buttressed by irrefutable evidence. Maria Rodriguez, her journalistic ally, played a critical role. "We're not just reporting," she told Elena during a secure video call. "We're creating a comprehensive narrative of institutional racism." The financial impact began to manifest. Investors started asking uncomfortable questions. Corporate partners requested additional compliance reviews. The carefully constructed facade of Thompson Real Estate began to show hairline fractures. Michael attempted to intervene. Desperate phone calls, pleading text messages. "My father will destroy you," he warned. Elena's response was a calculated silence. Her network expanded strategically. Urban policy experts, civil rights attorneys, data analysts. Each brought a unique perspective to dismantling the Thompson empire. The breakthrough came unexpectedly. A former Thompson Real Estate employee, a junior analyst named David Rodriguez, no relation to Elena, reached out with internal communications that revealed a systematic pattern of discriminatory practices. Emails, spreadsheets, internal memos, a treasure trove of documented misconduct. Elena's approach wasn't about personal vengeance, it was institutional accountability. City council meetings became battlegrounds of information. Zoning commission hearings turned into platforms for exposing systemic discrimination. Each presentation was a precision-guided missile of truth. Robert Thompson's network began to crumble. Not dramatically, not instantly, but systematically. Investors started pulling back. Corporate partners demanded explanations. The family's political connections became liabilities rather than assets. Michael found himself caught in an impossible position. His family's legacy was being dismantled. Document by document, narrative by narrative. Elena watched the systematic deconstruction with a sense of clinical detachment. This wasn't personal. This was justice. Her final move was her most strategic, a comprehensive report, anonymously distributed, that mapped out the entire ecosystem of discrimination. Not just Thompson Real Estate, but the broader system of institutional racism in urban development. The report was devastating, meticulously researched, legally bulletproof. Robert Thompson had called her street garbage at that fateful dinner. Now she was showing him the true meaning of power. Robert Thompson was a man unaccustomed to losing control. His first response was typical: aggressive legal maneuvering. Cease and desist letters flew like desperate missiles. Lawsuit threats became his primary language. But each legal challenge only amplified the emerging narrative of institutional corruption. Family dynamics began to fracture spectacularly. Karen Thompson, his wife, started distancing herself from her husband's increasingly desperate attempts to maintain appearances. Jessica, their daughter, became a surprising wild card. Young, politically aware, she saw her father's actions through a lens of generational accountability. Michael found himself trapped in an impossible position. His loyalty to his family collided violently with the emerging truth. Professional networks he'd cultivated began to evaporate. Colleagues became distant. Business contacts became increasingly cautious. "You're destroying everything," Michael confronted Elena during a tense coffee meeting. Her response was measured. Your father destroyed this long before I became involved." The public hearings became a crucible of accountability. Urban planning commissions, city council meetings. Each forum became a platform for exposing systematic discrimination. Elena's carefully compiled evidence transformed these spaces into tribunals of institutional reckoning. Robert's traditional power mechanisms began to fail. Political connections grew nervous. Longtime business partners started calculating risk versus association. His network of influence, meticulously built over decades, started showing catastrophic structural weaknesses. Media coverage intensified. What began as localized investigations transformed into a national narrative about urban development, systemic racism, and corporate accountability. Elena never positioned herself as the hero. She remained strategically in the background, allowing the evidence to speak. His desperate counterattacks became increasingly erratic. Attempts to discredit Elena revealed more about his own vulnerabilities than they undermined her credibility. Each attempt to silence her only amplified the story. Family dinners became battlegrounds of silent tension. The Thompson household, once a citadel of privilege, now felt like a crime scene of its own making. Jessica became an unexpected ally to truth. Young, politically engaged, she began sharing internal family documents that further exposed her father's systematic discriminatory practices. Her social media became a weapon of generational accountability. Robert's world was no longer about maintaining an empire. It was about survival. Professional boards began requesting explanations. Investor groups demanded transparency. The carefully constructed facade of Thompson Real Estate began crumbling like a poorly built development. Michael oscillated between loyalty and emerging conscience. The son was being forced to reckon with the true nature of his family's success. Elena maintained her composure. This was never about personal vengeance. This was institutional transformation. Robert Thompson had dismissed her as street garbage at that family dinner. Now he was watching his entire world become garbage, systematically, methodically, legally dismantled. The hunter had become the hunted. The system designed to protect him was now his most effective prosecutor. The final confrontation wasn't a singular moment. It was a symphony of systemic exposure. A congressional hearing on urban development became the stage. Elena sat behind the primary witnesses, her presence a quiet force of accountability. The room was packed: journalists, activists, urban policy experts, community leaders who had been silenced for decades. Robert Thompson looked smaller than Elena remembered. The powerful man who had called her street garbage now appeared diminished, trapped in a web of his own making. Jessica Thompson, his own daughter, delivered the most devastating testimony: internal documents, recorded conversations, a comprehensive exposé of her father's systematic discrimination. Her voice trembled with a mixture of rage and moral clarity. "This isn't just about my father. she stated. This is about a system that has consistently marginalized communities, that has treated entire populations as disposable. Michael's testimony was more complex. Torn between family loyalty and emerging conscience, he provided crucial insider perspective. He didn't vilify, he revealed. Our development practices weren't just business, Michael explained. They were a sophisticated mechanism of economic segregation. Elena had orchestrated this moment with surgical precision, not as a personal vendetta, but as a systemic intervention. The evidence was overwhelming. Decades of documented discrimination, purposeful economic exclusion, zoning practices designed to maintain racial and economic boundaries. What had been whispers were now official record. Robert's legal team looked defeated. Their strategies of denial and deflection crumbled under the weight of documented evidence. Media coverage was instantaneous. National networks, local stations, digital platforms. The story transcended a single family's downfall. It became a referendum on institutional racism in urban development. Elena watched, her expression unreadable. This was never about personal revenge. This was about structural accountability. The hearing's recommendations were comprehensive: mandatory diversity audits for real estate development, enhanced community consultation processes, financial penalties for discriminatory practices, creation of oversight committees with community representation. Robert Thompson's empire wouldn't be destroyed, but it would be fundamentally transformed. Michael's transformation was perhaps most profound. He resigned from the family business, started collaborating with community development organizations. His privilege became a tool for systemic change rather than maintenance. Jessica became a vocal advocate for urban equity, using her family's platform to amplify marginalized voices. Elena remained strategic. She didn't seek spotlight. She had created a mechanism for institutional change. The woman Robert had dismissed as street garbage had just redesigned the entire landscape of urban development accountability. In the hearing's final moments, a congressional representative looked directly at Elena, not as a witness, but as a catalyst of change. Sometimes, the representative said, true transformation comes from those society tries hardest to silence. Robert Thompson stared ahead, his world irreversibly altered. Elena Rodriguez had just rewritten the rules. 6 months after the congressional hearing, Elena sat in her small home office, reflecting on transformation. The world hadn't changed overnight, but fundamental shifts were undeniable. Thompson Real Estate was now required to implement comprehensive diversity programs. Community development boards had new powers of oversight. Michael was working with nonprofit organizations focused on equitable urban planning. Her phone buzzed, a message from a young Latina marketing professional she'd been mentoring. Because of you, the message read, I believe my voice matters. That was the real victory. Personal healing wasn't linear. Therapy helped her process the complex emotions, not just of the confrontation, but of years of systemic marginalization. She understood now that her fight was never just personal, it was collective. Michael remained in her periphery, not as a romantic partner, but as an emerging ally. His transformation was ongoing. He was learning, listening, using his privilege as a tool for accountability rather than exclusion. Jessica Thompson had become a significant voice in urban equity conversations. Their unexpected alliance demonstrated that change could emerge from the most surprising places. Elena's marketing firm had transformed. She now specialized in helping companies develop genuine, meaningful diversity strategies, not performative checklists, but substantive organizational change. Robert Thompson wasn't defeated, but he was fundamentally changed, forced into accountability, stripped of his unquestioned power. Her parents, her father now retired, her mother still working in home health, saw her differently, not just as a successful daughter, but as someone who had challenged systemic injustice. You didn't just fight for yourself, her mother told her during their weekly call. You fought for everyone who's been told they don't belong. The congressional hearings recommendations were slowly being implemented across multiple cities. Urban development practices were being re-examined. Community voices were gaining unprecedented platforms. Elena realized revenge was too small a concept. This was about restoration, about creating spaces where dignity wasn't a privilege, but a fundamental right. She looked at the wall of her office, not filled with awards or accolades, but with photographs of community leaders, of young professionals from marginalized backgrounds, of people reclaiming their narratives. The woman Robert Thompson had once called street garbage had rewritten the entire narrative, and she was just getting started.